Good morning, you all. Another Tuesday, another Compliance Tuesday. Today we will discuss something that is really complex. European regulation on deforestation-free products. The name by itself is already quite intriguingly long. It has a lot of text, this presentation, because I need to explain also a lot of new lingo that they have introduced. So bear with me. There is, however, quite some nice guides by various other parties that we will share with you later with the download kit. It's a pressure cooker session, around 45 minutes. Let me take you along. For those who don't know us, we are a software as a service, web-based. We offer professional support in the implementation and execution of product and supply chain compliance. We do that with 60 people in various locations since 2009. Officially, the company started in 2008. Non-food consumer products, that scope obviously today is a little bit different than it was 12 years ago. We are not an NGO, we are not a lab, we are not a market surveillance or other regulatory body. When our customers are challenged by market surveillance authorities, we are on the side of the customer at the table. And working with Product IP helps in communication with all kinds of stakeholders, let alone market surveillance authorities. Just a quick fun fact, the IP stands for Information Products, Product Information Platform, and IP for IP address, as we are a web-based solution. You might recognize me, I'm Casper, I'm one of the two founders. Maarten van der Dussen is the other one. Product IP is not about me, there's a complete team of 60 working everywhere hard to support everybody. And we are a proud sponsor of our local hero, skeleton boss, as we can call her, Kimberly Boss, Olympic medalist winner and runner-up world champion last year by 1/100th of a second after 4 runs. So her training has started already. Let's look forward to a good season. Why we are doing these sessions, it helps you, it helps us. We help ourselves when we help you, and the other way around. We need to read all this legislation anyway to be able to support you. We also need to understand what it means in terms of changing of processes and steps in the process, because sometimes, and that is the case at many of the new legislation, we need to build something, IT and workflow that supports it. And we want you to get a clear picture of what you can and should do yourself in preparation for legislation. Yeah? We introduced the word tsunami, and tsunami from Brussels. Let me take you to the train station in Brussels. That is what Brussels, the European Union Commission and Parliament are using to, let's say, make clear what the developments are. There are 6 platforms in the European legal train station. And from these platforms, there are regulations and directives departing. These are the trains. They have different statuses. They are still waiting to be departed or are underway, on hold. Some even have derailed, and some have arrived. Today, oh yeah, by the way, 584. You need to read them all in order to understand what the impact is. That's our job. But some of them are really serious business for you. So it's really a tsunami. 584. It's humongous. We are a European Green Deal platform today, and we are at a arrived train, one of 51 that are there. The Green Deal makes sense, legal framework to halt and reverse European-driven global deforestation. Arrived in September, so that means this one is signed off. We are in a transition period, and it's replacing the EU timber regulation. So it's not entirely new, it's stepping up efforts, basically. For your information, and there's links in the presentation, all these trains have their own page. All these trains enable you to be subscribed to and stay up to date. You can always interact. You don't need to be with 1,000 people to have a voice to be listened to. So you can comment, and or you can follow if trade organizations are replying and what is the feedback. So if you are really interested, maybe your business depends on certain aspects of legislation, why don't look the train up and subscribe? So the 2023-1115, the number of the train, it's replacing the 995-2010. 2010 is not a year, it's a number. It's a timber regulation. The DR, the Deforestation Regulation, replaces the EU Timber Regulation. We have directives and we have regulations. All these new legislations more likely are to be regulations and not directive. Directives is that everybody in Europe agrees on the goal, but each member state can use their own laws to achieve that goal. But in the case of deforestation-free products, it makes sense to have a regulation where we all agree on the same goal, but also on the way we're going to achieve that goal. Yeah, so it's, you can also say it's harmonized. We all follow the same pattern. It was already timber regulation, so why do we need to change it? Well, first of all, most of the legislation is there for 3 to 5 years and will be updated anyway. But in this case, the update is not just scope, it's also the way we need to do our due diligence. So it's in multiple directions that the upgrade is required. It was actually quite predictable that this would happen because the original agenda is not from last year. It's from probably around 2 decades ago. To give you an idea about the numbers are staggering, and I think, and I'm talking with 2 of my colleagues who are busy preparing us as team Product IP, but also as Product IP company, but also as Product IP platform on all kind of ESG and CSR aspects. In general, the numbers are staggering. It's like with energy consumption, what does it matter if your standby television current uses X instead of X minus 10%? Well, if there's a huge number of televisions, then it makes a sense. And that is with deforestation and forest degradation facts as well. 420 million hectares of forest. 1 hectare is 100 by 100 meter, which is it's a lot. It's larger than the European Union. Okay, so between 1990 and 2020, that's in the last 30 years, we cut down an area as large as the European Union. That is unbelievable, isn't it? But there were good reasons to do that because we needed the products and the wood. The problem is only we didn't manage that wood, and then it's gone. Yeah, and that is not good. And why it's not good? Because we actually accelerated and we are running out of time. Because at a certain tipping point, there is no more original forest there. There's only managed forest, and with that, also a lot of the connecting nature is gone. The objective of the new European Deforestation-free Products Regulation is to reduce the European impact on global deforestation by promoting the consumption of deforestation-free products. So what we want to do is we want to basically educate everybody, the business side, and when we leave the office at 5, 6, 7, or 8 o'clock tonight, our behavior as a consumer as well. To move towards deforestation-free products. And that is a trend in the sense there's connections with other ESG, CSR objectives. Look at packaging and packaging waste. We want to reduce a footprint of consumption. I think we'll definitely see another way of consumption in the next 7 years coming. It cannot be that it is the same. So you read about Europe And I know there are many skeptics out there saying, there's European Union again, trying to save the planet. But in fact, it's not like that entirely. The original commitment is a global commitment made already in 2014. And the first step after 2014 was the European Timber Regulation. In fact, in the US, and it's quite recently, there is a new bipartisan law proposed, the Fostering Overseas Rule of Law and Environmentally Sound Trade Forest Act. Bipartisan means that both sides of the Senate and the Chamber are agreeing on this. So they are working together to make a piece of legislation that is very likely to become an active one. Quite similar to what Europe has been written. So I think we've been leading the pack here. And that means that everything I will say to you, what you feel, okay, this is pressure that we need to put on the supply chain, it's not just coming by you. It's not just one company putting pressure on one part of the supply chain. It's an entire market. It's more than one market that will do so. Yeah? And others are set to follow. What is in the scope? Well, the original timber regulation focused on wood and products from the forest. The deforestation-free product says, what if we look at the land that is left after the wood has been forested? So wood has been cut illegally or legally, but what if wood is being cut illegally? What products are then produced on that? So there is a driver besides the demand for wood that causes deforestation. I think that's a true conclusion. That I think there are many business models where people could basically say to somebody, all the wood is yours, but just prepare the land for me because I want to have cattle. I want to have cocoa, coffee, oil palms, rubber, soya on that land. Or I want to have soy on that land so I can sell that so that somebody else can raise cattle. So there are multiple drivers, and these has been now addressed. That's why it says deforestation-free products. The original scope of the timber regulation is also enlarged. It basically covers now everything within custom codes and HS code that has wood in it. Not too much to escape. And by the way, MDF is not a kind of wood, but it's like a chipboard. It's a piece of wood composite made out of various parts of wood. What is not there is anything produced from wood that otherwise would have been called waste. That goes the same for other things in scope. I think in general, if there is a legit process and from that process is waste, and you can reuse that waste to make products, then most of the modern legislation will identify that is really part of what you can call a circular economy. I'll have detailed slides on the scope later. So you might be in it for a surprise when you say, okay, I'm not looking into this because I'm in wooden products, but my wooden products were not in the scope of the EU timber regulation, but they probably will be now in the scope of the deforestation-free products. So it's based on HS codes, custom codes. And that already implies that one of the key market surveillance entries is the customs office. Who will be affected? Well, everybody basically, all operators placing a product on the market. And on the market placing means importing. The market is the European Union. You need to read all natural or legal persons placing a product on the market can be said importing a product on the European market. Or exporting relevant products from the market. All right, that's interesting. So when you start to export, you need to be able to prove that maybe parts that you have used are also in compliance. So the trail goes on. It makes sense. I don't think, this is like a double blockage. So if you would be happily lucky to be able to import illegally raw material illegally under the new legislation, and you will make products out of it, you have a second chance to be caught when you're exporting it. And you will have no information trail. So it's in and out. Of course, traders who make relevant products available on the market. Traders, and you can call distributors, what you would say in other non-food products, but they mention it also traders because you could, trade in raw materials as being beef or hides or soy or cattle or wood, not a consumer products, and that makes the word trader a little bit different, including online distribution. And it can be an authorized representative. If you look at roles in the supply chain, I don't think this is really different from other non-food legislation, except the word trader, which is, you could say like it's a wholesaler. They all have a shared responsibility, but of course the first and key responsibility lies with the entity responsible for placing the product on the market, the importer, basically. Again, that's another reference to what would be the key market surveillance authority. What should people do? Well, you could imagine that you could fly or swim or drive or sail against the product flow and go all the way down to some area and figure it out yourself. Yeah, you could do that. Or you could buy foresters and be the legal owner of a piece of land and solve it from the source back to your products. I think the reality will be that you cannot, because it's not your duty, and you will start to rely on third parties. But it is basically an information trail. So it is collecting of information and evidence on the legality and freedom from deforestation of raw materials products. I had a discussion with my colleague this morning about this. You can compare it with information around chemical substances in products. If parts or raw materials in a legal world travel with information, then information should be there. I think in many cases information is there, but the whole supply chain never realized that this information had to travel with the product. So there is more or less a data challenge in this matter. The second one is there need to be a risk assessment about this kind of products that you buy, and that sometimes risk can be avoided by, can we divert to another source? Can we divert to another source of wood or another product? Can we make a decision about certain things? And where the timber regulation focuses on the raw materials, the deforestation-free products goes beyond the product. So there is a large part of social compliance and environmental compliance involved. The risk definitions, however, will come from other sources. So it will be like market standards, which countries will be high, medium, and low risk, and within countries, which areas maybe will be called high, medium, or low risk. And when there is risk and you need to do risk mitigation, then you need to do due diligence. And when you have done that, you need to declare it. So there will be a declaration, not like CE, but like a DOC, like a declaration of conformity, but this is called a DDD, due diligence declaration. And that will be a standard document. In order to be able to mitigate risk, you need to understand what's in the product. And that means not writing down, if one asks for what kind of species of wood were used and you don't write down MDF, somebody needs to know where the MDF is made of. And if you say, but my trader doesn't know it, no, but your trader is not the one that makes the MDF. Somewhere in the supply chain, somebody makes MDF and somebody makes a table or somebody makes a cabinet, and they are using wood, and that wood is bought somewhere and that is cut somewhere in a sawmill, and it comes from somewhere. And those plots of land, that's one of the other slides, how these are identified, that's not different from how the municipality where you live have information on your plot of land where your house is standing. It's not like the EU has invented all kind of new things in this legislation. They just say, if the trail from source to you is legal, then certain types of information should be there. Yeah? So origin of the commodity linked to geolocation, plots of land with latitude and longitude, and when it was cut. So where does this wood come from? Yes, somewhere around in the Netherlands. No, that's not detailed enough. So we define what is detailed enough. And also not somewhere on where I live, National Park de Veluwe in the Netherlands. No, that's also not how those kind of permits are being given out. So the structure of permitting certain things is not new and not invented by this legislation. And from who is this wood? Where did it come from? Contact names, suppliers, buyers. And is there proof of freedom? The timber regulation and the deforestation-free products legislation say that it is up to the countries to define what is legal and not. So it's not that the European Union says what is legal and not. It's the same like with child labor. Certain types of labor are permitted in the Netherlands for people from 15 years and older. The general rule of thumb is 15 years and older globally. But if some countries say it cannot be done from 17, then 17 is the threshold. So the same here. The European Union doesn't make the threshold. Countries make the threshold, but the European Union gives an idea about risk. This is called a corruption index, and it's also not new. Yeah. And that risk assessment, systematic evaluation, that has to do with, do we really need this type of wood if there's only so much of this wood left? Or can we start to divert to something else? Or, I don't know, this is a type of risk assessment. Plus plausibility of evidence. So how likely, what is the quality of the evidence? This could be similar when you get a test report from an electrical safety on a coffee maker. If you ask for a test report and you get a copy of a copy of a copy, or you get a picture of every page, there's no test laboratory that gives you a copy per page. They send a PDF of a test report. And if somebody claims that they are the owner, they have original documents. And if somebody says, but my next pawn in the supply chain doesn't have these, then you need to start getting worried. And this is not new. You know, you can also say it, what I do in my risk assessment trainings, you need to move from non-fo to info. At a certain point in time, the information quality is no longer there, which is odd because it should be there. Yeah. The complexity of the supply chain, can be significant. There are also distinguishes made between what large companies need to do and small, medium-sized enterprises need to be done, and what you need to do on a low-risk country. So on a high-risk country, you still can do trade, but the due diligence effort need to be into the nitty-gritty detail. Whereas for low-risk countries, there can be, they're like a pre-assumption of compliance with a lot of the evidence that there is, because the systems start to work. Those judgments will be made from the European Commission. The information will be there in certain websites and annexes. And I also think that many of you will start to rely on companies like FSC and PFSC and other audit companies to deal with this. But be aware, there might be not enough capacity in those organizations. The moment you read this and listen to me and think about, there could be doubt about this country, or there could be doubt about this trader, or there could be doubt about this wood, write it down and make a decision, because that is the whole idea about this. They want the business to become conscious about certain things and make conscious decisions. This is not different by collecting compliance evidence on an electrical appliance. Why is there no information coming from somebody who claims to make this product 24/7? Am I dealing with the right entity? Why does it take weeks and weeks to get information from trees that have been cut 4 or 5 years ago? That means that either I'm talking to the wrong people, B, the information is not there, or the information is there, but it's just poorly organized. Okay, the last one I can solve. Previously, timber regulation had risks for countries: high, normal, low. Low could be simplified due diligence. They will look into countries as well. because there might be, even in a low-risk country, a very high-risk region somewhere. So it will be like a mix. I doubt actually that a low-risk country will have a high-risk region, but I can imagine that a normal risk country could have even low-risk regions. So there will be areas, and the hope, of course, is that there will become more and more low-risk regions and more low-risk countries. But countries will start to realize that they need to fight corruption themselves. They need to ensure that proper due diligence can be done in their way. They need to start to cooperate with other partners to say, listen, any wood that comes from our, or any deforestation-free related products that come from our country actually can be covered by low risk and can be covered by simplified due diligence, because we take care a lot at risk management ourselves. New. Plot of land. Yeah, it's something that you never see when you buy a table as a consumer, but somewhere there was a plot of land. And a plot of land, it's really real estate property. And why is this relevant? Because I want you to look at the plot of land where your house is, and somewhere is registered in your country where the edges are of the plot of land that your house has been built on. Either you rent it or you have bought it, but there is a property owner of the plot of land. And that the plot of land has coordinates, and those coordinates have either, in the new legislation, a point or a polygon. So you will have like a bit of material, basically, somewhere. I call it a bit of material, but it could also be a bit of origin that has up to 6 decimal digit latitude and longitude points, that data. So it's not somewhere in the Netherlands. No, it's exactly there in the Netherlands. Somewhere in Brazil. No, exactly there in Brazil. And latitude and longitude are not new. And if you would be in mining industry, you will get a permit for a certain area. And as soon as the area becomes large, you will use polygons that has the points around the area to define where you can dig or where you can cut or where you can harvest. What is your responsibility? It's not new. What new is that the law just emphasizes that if this information is not there, you really should be worried. It's actually, you could also say it's quite odd that we need to write down in legislation that we all should be worried when this information is not there, but apparently it's necessary. It's of course not necessary for you because you all have this information, right? So how can you, for example, then determine if a piece of wood comes from that land? Well, you could use, it's not like DNA, but there's different ways that you could do spot checks, but that's not your initial duty. Your initial duty is start to ask for information. If you are not an SME, and there's a definition of small, medium-sized enterprises, first of all, you have a little bit more time, 6 months, but I think 6 months is irrelevant in the scheme of things. But a large company must assign a compliance officer, somebody that is relevant for due diligence on this part of legislation, at a management level. So yes, work can be delegated to somebody in the organization, but responsibility for compliance must be at the management level. Compare it with signing a declaration of conformity, a CE declaration. You can delegate it, but somebody in the management is relevant, responsible. Why is that? Well, if the management doesn't give the means to the organization, as in terms of available hours, knowledge, budget, proper tools like product IP, then the mission is doomed to fail, and it's their responsibility. So assigning somebody at the management level and making them responsible makes it, like, together with the due diligence declaration, a full circle. If you sign documents as being compliant, but you didn't give means to the company to be compliant, then you could say it's forgery and fraud. Yeah, so by adding this layer on the legislation, they're putting a different kind of legislation in place. Large companies must, of course, do independent audits by themselves, but must also be audited at least once a year by external companies. There is where I feel is already another kind of trouble in place, because will there be enough capacity for independent audits? Yeah. You must document decision making. Yeah, that's not new. You know, don't put it in an email, don't put it on a post-it, don't put it on an Excel sheet that everybody can change. Just put it in clear meeting minutes. Basically, they say, make your judgment, make your assessment, put down your goals. What would you like to change in which time, with which suppliers, which products? How do you keep track of change? And there will be failures, but how do you deal with that? And how do you step up your efforts and make decisions again? It's about making decisions and moving forward and managing change. That's what operators need to be able to demonstrate. Yeah. This due diligence declaration is relevant in time. It's not something that you can do later. You need to have it in place before placing on the market, before import. And my anticipation is that traders will be confronted with shipping companies that will say, do you have your due diligence declaration number, your reference, your feedback? Otherwise, I won't take the goods. Because they will be responsible for clearing the goods out of the harbors when they cannot be imported. So they want to prevent it. That's my take on it. There will come June 30, 2028, a digital system where companies can enter this information. This is not for SMEs. This is for large traders. However, if you are an SME and importing private label for large companies, then you'll probably be, subjected to this as well. Because ultimo, somewhere else in the supply chain, the private label company might be so large that their due diligence effort will require this kind of legislation to be fulfilled. And so you need to balance, where am I with my company? I can be an SME, but actually I'm always dealing with large companies. And as soon as that is the case, then everything that's called due diligence, which is on their table, will automatically go to your table. So don't do the ostrich approach and put your hand in the sand. And that's what I mean. As long as this electronic interface is not in place, you cannot obviously register, and you cannot do that by paper. You don't need to do it at all. This is the promise that the European Commission has made themselves. And it's part of a complete digitization effort of around 110 different custom systems. And you see that that there are other legislations in place where they refer to this electronic register as well. And there are different parts that need to be on that due diligence declaration, and you will get a number back. Yeah? So it's like with ePREL, you hand in data on the energy safety of your lamp, and you'll get a QR code back, and that is basically the link. You need to collect and keep your information for 5 years, but I think most of the compliance systems like ours will offer 10 years anyway. So maybe some of you will say, I hope they delay a little bit, and 30 June 2028 becomes 2029. Well, I will not use this date as a kind of a trigger date, because if you look at what you need to do, mapping with whom you are doing business and what is their status, it's really a lot of work. Because it's not just a product. Yeah. Part of the supply chain requirements here have to do with the area where the forest was, and what is the impact of the deforestation? What's the impact on the local environment? What's the impact? Maybe there was a river, and now the river is run into a different track. And what happens to the downstream people? And what happens to the indigenous people rights? What about anti-corruption? This is significant. Land use rights, environmental protection, and I predict that here NGOs will play the NGO card. There's a lot of things happening in the UK around, I think it's Carlisle and frozen chickens and soy production. The trails of goods are basically there, and they can be followed. So it's part of due diligence. you could also say we're actually doing this already because we are working on Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. We are looking into the European Due Diligence Directive. We feel that we have to do this as part of what's our brand worthiness in the sense. So we do audits of companies, but this goes further than the first tier. Yeah, this is not just a trader from who you buy products. You really need to start building a supply chain. And as I said in the beginning, this is not something that you need to build by yourself. I think everybody that is in this meeting, which is just a small part of the world, will slowly start to put the pressure on the supply chain and asking the same questions. So the supply chain has two options: bail out or comply. And then we can say, yeah, but then they will sell the product somewhere else. Well, America legislation is the next. Then total with Europe, you're talking about 600-700 million people in total that really have buying power as well. You need to trust the importance of money also into this direction. There will be a register. It's like a European Chamber of Commerce, but they want, basically what they say, they want to identify who is involved in certain product categories. And that's not new. That register is not there. It will also include a register of authorized representative, which makes sense, because if authorized representatives are just used as a front man, just as a fake office to divert questions being asked by market surveillance authorities and delay due diligence processes by them, then you could blacklist authorized representatives quite easily. Yeah. What also will be public will be publication of court judgments. So it will be very clear what kind of penalties will be imposed in relationship to a supply chain. And that makes sense because it will give you a clear indication of who involved is actually posing a risk. You could say this is like the RAPEX/safety gate of non-food compliance recalls, right? So that will be public information. There's work to be done for them. They need to assign market surveillance authorities. Some of them were already there, but they need to be, getting the countries need to make clear that this legislation becomes national legislation, and they must have funds, and I think there lies a job for the member states to also don't do this as a small part of additional work for market surveillance authorities. This is significant job. Controls will be done basically at the borders, but the total aim is, and it depends a little bit on the kind of country, a country like the Netherlands and Germany and France and Spain and Greek with good large harbors where a lot of forest products are entering, then they need to do at least 9% of all what's coming in as audits. So the risk-based approach lies there. 1 to 9%. 9%, 1 of 10 almost of shipments being checked on paperwork. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. But if it's being done electronically and highlighted in certain risk and products based on information, what kind of wood have you used? Okay, can that be done for risk assessment? Sure. If you are running through a supermarket and you scan the products yourself to go to the self-checkout, you can make a risk profile based on what's in your basket. Certain mix of products indicate a potential risk of fraud. And that is the same with what's in the basket, in the sense of what's in the basket of wood. And there are, like with REACH legislation and substances, there are just standard names for different kind of wood. It's nomenclature. We don't need to make it up. We just pick from a database. It's this kind of wood and it's this kind of wood, and that already gives a risk profile. Yeah. What if it's non-compliant? Okay, then it cannot be made available, it cannot be made imported, and cannot be exported. So it will be claimed, probably destroyed. The same when compliant and non-compliant is mixed. And if you cannot divide non-compliant from compliant, then you are losing all the products. Sanctions will be fines or penalties. You will be derived from your economic profit, so your margin is gone. And it could be ultimo maximum 4% of total turnover as a punishment. Yeah, that's significant. What's the time frame? Okay, it's already been signed off. It's relevant from December 30, 2024, and as said, SMEs get half a year more, but that half year more is not a lot really, right? So perhaps your private label customer is not, and you are an SME. It's a very special time frame because you need to look back in time. It's not just wood related to that date. It's products coming from everything post December 2020. And that makes it a little bit complex. So you can imagine there is a law applicable, but you can also say that some of the wood or wood related products actually come from an area and we want to look back in time. Yeah. Like it's not have nothing to do with products being placed on the market, by the way. This is about products that come from areas that have been illegally deforested from that date. So the risk profile goes back, and that has to do with the scope. Because there's not only wood, there's also derived products. Derived products are composite products, and there's a long list in an annex. And there are questions already, for example, would cardboard or packaging or finished products affected by this regulation? No, it will not, because packaging of end user goods is it cannot be dealt with even within this legislation. It would be far too complex. Having said that, if you're reading the draft packaging and packaging waste legislation, you will see that there are equal due diligence requirements about: is the source of the paper pulp coming from renewable forests? Is part of it 50% in the future coming from recycled sources, etc.? This scope is from this legislation is pretty clear. There's an Annex 1, and that Annex 1 refers to custom codes. If it's not on that custom codes, this piece of legislation is not applicable to that HS code. Take you a brief look over this. This is screenshots. The scope can be extended in the next years. Cattle is there, but also meat of cattle. The X means if you look at the 0201 series, then it's just to focus on that. Everything almost from cattle, raw hides and skins of cattle. So here you all say, when you look at derived products or composite products, I've read the statements from the leather industry in Europe, and they make it clear: if you import hides, leather, to make leather shoes in Europe, then those hides must comply with this legislation. But if you make shoes and you import them into the EU, then this legislation is not applicable. Oh, that makes life easy. No, it's not what they've written there, but what they didn't write down, and that struck me, was that this piece of legislation basically sets the industry standard for Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, European due diligence efforts. Because if you would buy shoes from outside the European Union, and they are from leather, where would you look for if you talk about risk in the supply chain? Besides the chemicals, you would also look at the hides. Where are the hides coming from? From cattle. Okay, where? Which cattle? And is this cattle coming from deforested, illegally deforested plots of lands? Somebody will say, I don't know. Okay, start to find out. That's what I mean with that. I was struck by that this branch organization apparently didn't make this 1+1. Basically, this piece of legislation sets the standard for due diligence on other areas. There goes your hot chocolate. There goes chocolate and other food preparation containing coca. So chocolate by itself is already mentioned, and chocolate powder. as well. Coffee is also there. Yeah. Oil, palm oil is there. Soap is not there, but it could contain palm oil. So if you are making soap in Europe and you're importing palm oil, then this is affected. If you're importing soap, it's not affected, but it's the same with importing the leather shoes. If you start to look from a due diligence point of view into your supply chain and you're importing soap and there's palm oil in it, why not follow a similar strategy as if you would be importing palm oil to start to map your supply chain risk and do your due diligence? Yeah. That would be, according to my opinion, the best way. I would do piggyback ride basically on what the rest of the industry already will start to do on due diligence and start asking questions. Rubber. A good friend of mine asked, what about rubber? Because rubber is also used in cables and electrical cables. Well, electrical cables are not here, but rubber is. And the scope is quite extensive. Right? Inner tubes of rubber are there. Pneumatic tires of rubber are there. Yeah. So this X is not excluding, right? It's focus on. Soybeans. So if you are in cattle feed for cattle, or are you importing feed for dogs or cats, and a large part of that product has soy, then again, this could be a great way to start doing due diligence, following what the rest of the market is doing. So maybe it will make life easier if large traders in soy will start to put pressure on the whole supply chain. And your product manufacturer outside Europe is actually using soy, chances are that he will start to purchase soy from legit sources. Yeah. And then the scope for wood, it's actually on 2 pages. I will not go over it, but it's really, really much bigger than it was from the timber regulation. It has basically almost everything there. Tableware, kitchenware of wood. It says other articles of wood. Okay, there you go. Doesn't really make a lot of exclusions there. Seats, beds, parts, furniture, wood. You see it on 4-1 other articles of wood, pulp and paper, with exception of bamboo-based and recovered waste and scrap products. So paper itself, yes. Books, printed books materials, yes. But packaging is not here. So what about packaging? It's not relevant for packaging as part of consumer goods. However, requirements will come from packaging and packaging waste regulations. Yes. So the fact that it's not written in this legislation does not mean that similar, due diligence aspects will start to become applicable for that. But it would not make sense for each shipment of a consumer good to also register the packaging at the desk for the EU Deforestation-free products import. That would be an overkill as such. If you import packaging material so I can, as a consumer, use it to pack my Christmas presents for my friends and family, then that packaging material is, of course, a product as such, paper. Yeah. Leather shoes, I mentioned it already, similar. Rawhides are, I think the case is clear. Yeah. I do feel that the derived products due diligence would really benefit from the main sector due diligence. So I think if you would be approaching a leather shoe manufacturer today, he might be a little bit overwhelmed because he needs to start asking questions to his hide manufacturer. But his hide manufacturer maybe has not received any questions because they want to sell hides to Europe directly. So I think it will be relevant. Last but not least, we couldn't have planned the date better. We even moved the day forward if we only had knew, and we didn't. But on this very date this morning, WWF made an announcement that we're actually, and we are, you, me, everybody is off track to reach our goals to protect and restore forests by 2030. I put a link there. That's not good news. We actually are off track and have increased the speed in which we are deforesting our forest. So reading material will be there. It's not our marketing campaign. If so, the timing would be fantastic. Although this is bad news. So there's no time to waste in that sense. What can you do yourself? Very practically, it's not different with other supply chain due diligence when you start to do compliance. Are you really sure that the ones that you buy your products from are the ones that you want to buy the products from in the future? And so map your supply chain partners. Are they clear about what you expect from them in the future? Will they start to do due diligence, or are they just mainly a service partner, a logistic partner, which have added value? But that probably means that you will need to start to bypass them when it comes to due diligence. And if they are not happy with that, then they have a problem with you and not the other way around. So I see, and some of you are really a long-time friend for me, but I see you mostly struggle already with the first tier supply chain partners. With whom are we dealing? What are their business licenses? What are their positions, etc.? Can I have a copy of the business license? What are their future roles in the market? And are they the ones that are going to help us mapping second tier, third tier, fourth tier? Or am I need to do that myself? To get a clear answer on that, I think it's trivial. And it will take time. I mean, you know, if you have 50 to 100 to more suppliers, and either you make them that decision for them, or you can force them. But you cannot say after 2 years, yeah, we've asked all our first tier suppliers, but they didn't want to cooperate. That is not an excuse. Yeah. Once you know where they are, then you also need to find out where is the source of my raw materials. And if this is connected to high, medium, and low risk countries / regions, then you already know where you need to focus. You know, your focus will not be in low risk regions from low risk countries. If these supply chain partners or areas already covered by third-party programs such as FSC, PFSC, that would be great. Do you get documents with their license numbers on it? Like, are there license numbers on the invoices? So is there a document trail? If you listen to me again and you think, oh, this supplier won't and this supplier won't, write down these names. This is not about managing a forest. This is about managing risk in the supply chain. Somebody else should manage a forest, yeah, and it should not be you. I think it's incredible complex if you have never do due diligence. It can be quite overwhelming, but what could not be overwhelming is to start with your mapping your first tier. Try to figure out what the original sources are from your key raw materials and in which countries are they. Yeah, so then you have, like, with a rain radar, you have see where is the high risk, where it's red and where it's orange and where it's green, and then you know your focus. Otherwise, you might be putting a lot of energy in low risk countries and low risk regions of FSC and PFSC partners where you should be able to rely on already. Yeah. I cannot give you more time. I cannot give you more hours in the day, not more budget, but I can give you some ideas how to use your resources smart. Keep calm and stay compliant. For the pressure cooker questions. There's another question. Which general environmental standards from our suppliers will be accepted to prove that materials were EU conform? ISO 4001, etc. Yeah, ISO is not an EU standard, but it's an international standard. Absolutely. But it's not just about the environment. It's not just about pollution on a site where this due diligence goes. This goes much further. So 14001, when it is like, I'm buying products from a factory and they are spilling oil and therefore drinking water is contaminated, that's 14001 stuff. No, this is about I'm killing a forest, and by killing this forest, I'm diverting a flow of a river, and by that, I'm basically killing 50,000 indigenous people and deriving them from their source of life, which was fishing in that river. So that's not 14,001. That's due diligence effort. Yeah. Will the digital due diligence declaration be part of the digital product passport? Well, it's a lot of D's. Will the DDD be part of the DDP? No, it's not mentioned in the legislation, but I can imagine that you would like to have that number somewhere. Don't forget that this this due diligence declaration is often related to raw materials. But if it is related to consumer products, it might be wise to do it. You know, it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't skip your obligation to register, you know. So personally, if I would be a brand and I would have done proper due diligence, I would demonstrate that, and digital product passport would then be the way to do it. But using that, it's not. It doesn't mean you do not need to register it at the European register that will be there in 2028. So there's two separate things. Good question, Frank. Thanks for that. Scope will be evaluated in the next 2 years, and then I think slowly it will also become a little bit more clearer about due diligence efforts. I think the European Union just hopes that a lot of countries that supply all kind of raw materials will start to come to senses and start to do their own risk profiling. So about independent audits, we need to get our DD system, risk analysis and mitigation steps, and must be audited. Yes, if you are a large company, that's true. But anyway, if you are a large company and you will be covered under Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, you already have that because it's a non-financial chapter of your annual reporting, which need to be released via accountants, which is an independent third party. Yeah. What they say is you need somebody that is not part of the company have an opinion about the way you are doing your due diligence. It's not just your blue eyes. I think, and that is part, we have said it before, when you read in between the lines of all the legislation, then relying on my blue eyes that right has been revoked by Brussels. We have had the right to do all things by ourselves. We had the industry promises to do all by ourselves, and Brussels has said now, okay, you wanted to do all by yourself, it doesn't work, so we are going to make it mandatory. Sorry for everybody that did a great effort, but we have to do it in order to establish level playing field and keep the cowboys out, basically. So yes, yearly independent audits, I would say part of the annual reporting as such. Make it, you could say the yes, but why do you make it a yes and? Yes, and why wouldn't you communicate about your goals and your achievements publicly? Is it really that bad to say to the world, it's a hell of a job that we try to do here, and this is what the first results are, and this also, we made a decision not to continue this product, or we made a change to this product because it will reduce risk. It helps you to explain the behavior of your portfolio, probably, and pricing and what is available to consumers. I would suggest that use the open communication as the driver for your change. That solves also the discussion internally at the coffee machine. Is this really necessary? It's really necessary. Do you think that a wood policy would be recommended? I think it's unavoidable. 1 to 9% will be checked by the authorities. Will that be 100% when the electronic interface is live? No, the the interface probably will spit out a risk profile to ensure that those that are low risk are not picked out unnecessarily. And probably the electronic interface will make the 9% not a random 9%, but a less random 9% in the future. But we'll see. I think in the scope of products, there are products that, you know, at a certain moment the whole supply chain is set, and you can check 100%, but you will have 100% right. Then don't check them again. Yeah. And the one of 9%, is it out of my own experience? No, it's written down. It is not. I make up a lot of things. I'm good at that, but this is not on Compliance Tuesday. It's really written down. I think it's done also to have really minimum threshold goals to the EU member states. This legislation is not a joke for the industry, not a joke at all. And it should not be a joke for the member states and the market surveillance duties at all. Don't get me wrong, when Brussels writes between the lines, we are quite fed up with everybody that they have an opinion about market surveillance authorities in that. Well, the efforts is not enough. You know, it's not the people, it's also not the budget that is available in some cases. But if governments are not stimulating that really things are done, then even the hands of the market surveillance authorities are tied. Yeah? We cannot increase the pressure on all of you and as well on market surveillance authorities and not change the way people work. No more question here. Good. This one is recorded. The German session and the Dutch session this afternoon will also be recorded. We'll have feedback from them. We'll gather some other of the guides. There's a European guide. There are some information sheets available. And we'll make a whole set and then enable that set via quick registration so that you are also enlisted on a news mail letter group so we can keep you informed about next step on this. That was a 1 hour pressure cooker session on deforestation-free products. I hope it didn't spoil your lunch effort or lunch taste or dinner taste in some case. Lunch for me. Wish you a good one. Talk to you soon again. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.